Hi John, lovely to meet up with you and begin to do some work on your game. Just a quick recap as promised on the key points that we discussed during your visit. First of all, we started talking about your sequencing of moves during the downswing, how you've got to, particularly in transition, you have to slide and rotate. Your body is extending on the way back, it's going back into flexion as you transition, which is sort of the rotational aspect of things, which we can discuss in further detail when you visit again, if needed. And the linear movement or the slide is the hip slide going in there to start the arms, lower into the arms, shifting of the weight, etc. So what we were identifying at the start, obviously no background with golf coaching, very few swing thoughts, if any, at the moment. So we're just trying to give you an insight into what you're doing. What we saw at the beginning was a player who slides way too fast, and as a result the arms can't keep up. When a player slides too fast, the arms get left behind, the angle in the right arm is maintained too long, the angle in the wrists can start to be maintained too long, and the sweet spot starts to fall underneath the right arm when viewed from down the line, which we'll come to shortly, and that results in the push shot that you've got. You also mentioned that you had this sort of, you were intrigued about this jumping up look through the ball, and the flexing of the neck. The flexing of the neck it's actually a flexing of the whole upper torso, really. It's a last minute thing to help you try and turn the corner. You can see that the neck flexes forward, the chest flexes forward, and the lead wrist starts to flex. And that's a way of, if the club is approaching the golf ball too much from the inside, as you add flex, it's a way of turning this corner. Otherwise the club and the arms just get thrown out to the right too much, and that results in the pushes and the hooks. The longer the club, the more speed you're generating, the bigger the corner you've got to turn, the harder it is for you to make those little compensations. Hence the reason why your iron shots might be a little bit of a block to the right, but your driver can be an uncontrollable one. So that move through the ball, the flexing of the neck, the flexing of the wrist, that's why you're doing it. The jumping up is a case of the lead leg has gone a long way forward. There's a lot of flex gone in the lead leg as you're thrusting forward, as discussed during your session. So now you've got to spring up out the ground a little bit more than what would be ideal. So now you're going to push up. It's not a bad move. We showed you Dustin Johnson doing that. Every good player does that in varying degrees. There's just a little bit too much emphasis on that. As you push up, that allows the hips and the chest to continue to turn. If you didn't push up at such a high rate, again, you'd hit a bigger block than you currently do. So there's a few things in there that are excessive based on the little compensations, the last minute compensations that you make. But ultimately the lower body thrusts forward at too high a rate, the arms can't keep up, and then we throw in those little sort of compensatory moves at impact. So I'm just going to stop you there when the left arm is hitting the right hip, and I'm going to show you the work we did during the drill. So the sequencing drill is pretty straightforward. You're going to swing to the top and stop. You're going to hold it for a count of 3, and you're going to try and execute the shot. Now initially it's not a ball striking drill. It's a great exercise to do in the nets at the club where you're not worried about the outcome of the shot too much. But ultimately what we're doing is we're taking away any momentum, any rhythm. The only way you can now execute that shot is with more efficient mechanics. So with no swing, with still no swing keys at this stage other than stop at the top, hit the shot. And what we saw was, in order for you to hit that shot effectively, these two swings are 2 swings apart. We start to see some changes. We start to see the body thrust forward at a slightly reduced rate. We start to see the right arm and the left arm engaging a little bit earlier, so the left arm moves away from the right shoulder, right arm starts to straighten a little bit sooner, and you can see that the lead knee, rather than getting, let's say, 2 inches out in front of the lead ankle, It's just an inch out in front of the lead ankle, which is pretty much what the model prescribes. It would then go a little bit further as the swing progressed, which you can see. And again, that drill is just quieting down the lower body. Encourage you to engage the arms a little bit sooner. And as we come into impact, everything just looks a little bit more synchronized, a little bit, legs are a little bit quieter, arms are a little bit more in line with the torso. You can see on the left that the torso has gone out in front of the hands a little bit too much, and then the head is dipping down a little bit less because you don't need to compensate quite as much, so the swing's not coming quite as much from the inside as it maybe was previously, so you don't need to make those last minute compensations on the way through. So the idea with the sequencing drill is to calm down the rate at which you slide. Remember, we talked about you sliding and rotating. Very difficult to rotate through the golf ball in an appropriate manner if the slide in the linear action is sort of running out of control. So a little bit too much slide, making it difficult for you to rotate, which is why when we look at this swing now, there's a little bit less flex in the lead leg. The body's in a more appropriate position to open up. So consequently, that jumping up through the ball doesn't look as excessive. It's a move that all players do. It's a move that I wouldn't want to eliminate from your game, but it's certainly a move that I'd want to, do in a more appropriate manner and quieten down a little bit. So just balancing up the rate at which we slide and therefore rotate and extend through the hit. We then moved on to your down the line footage, so I'll just get some footage up now for you and we'll discuss the changes that we prescribed from the down the line view. Okay, so from a down the line perspective, what we saw at the start of the session, and again it related to the push shot that you were hitting, as we saw a situation where the club was rolled beneath the plane a little bit too much in the takeaway. So ideally we will want the hands and the club to trace that green line, the hand plane line, in the early part of the swing. And it's fair to say that when you look at most decent players, most consistently good ball strikers, we have a situation where the club is either in line with the hands at that point or slightly out in front of the hands at that point. We also, because of the move that we're making, we create a little bit too much of a gap between the left arm and the torso. The shoulder tilts are a little bit too level, and the club face is opening up relative to the arc of the swing. So what we move that we prescribed here is that you feel like the hands are coming in and the club is staying out, and that there is less rotation of the back of the left hand during your takeaway. And you can see now that the club now is out in front of the hands. It has rotated less in relation to the arc of the swing. The shoulder tilts are different, a little bit more tilted downwards, and the condition of the elbows is slightly different as well. The left elbow now sits above the right a little bit more, rather than being level as before. This now makes it easier for you to apply the upward aspect of the swing as the right elbow flexes, rather than pushing the club behind you and retracting the right elbow like we see on the left hand image. So the left elbow sort of goes this way. We see that the right elbow folds, stays in front of you a little bit more. Shaft sets a little bit more vertically. So you start to see some nice changes. And again, relative to a push shot, we wouldn't want to see the shaft too flat. We wouldn't want to see the back of the left hand rotated too much. Here we've got a shaft that's sitting more vertically, and we've got a left hand that's rotated a little bit less, largely due to the result of the improved takeaway. The only other advice we gave you then was to feel like it's a three-quarter swing. What we saw here at the top was a little bit of a last-minute lifting of the golf club, pushing the club across the line. So the swing is now directed to the right, which again is typical of someone who pushes the golf ball, with a little bit less lifting of the arms, feeling that the swing is maybe 3/4 length, we can see that the shaft now is much more in line. It's shorter parallel, so therefore it should look a little bit laid off rather than across the line like this. It should look a little bit more laid off. And the right shoulder is still visible. When you're filming your own swing, that's a nice little guideline as to whether you are lifting the arms a little bit too much at the top. So hands in, club out, 3/4 feel. When you do that, you also notice that the gap between the knees is a little bit less. And again, that's a nice change for someone who has a history of pushing the golf ball. If you turn a lot in the backswing, slide a lot in the downswing, you've got a beautiful machine for hitting a block straight out to the right hand side. Beg your pardon, wrong graphic. So you've got a beautiful machine for pushing the ball over here. Here we've rotated the club face less, we've rotated the body a little bit less. Doesn't mean it's not rotating, but it's rather than making a level turn like we see here, it's making more of a turn on a tilted angle. We've controlled the path of the arms, and we've now got a machine, if you will, that's much more suitable for hitting the ball down your desired line, and certainly makes the degree at which you can push the golf ball, because the one thing with golf is I can guarantee that you will hit a push again at some point, but it does make it more manageable, and it means that when you go and practice you can work on pieces that are more appropriate. We discussed a little change to your grip, maybe look at strengthening your grip on the golf club a little bit so that you require less of a release on the way through. The occasional one that goes quick left on you as you roll in the club face, and again it's a little compensation you make almost in anticipation of the push to the right. That's not your major problem, I don't worry too much about that for you, but the main thing is to get the push under control. So sequencing improved, less driving of the hips, calming that down, less rolling of the club face in the takeaway, and less lifting of the arms on the way to the top. When you're doing that, also when you're practicing, spend a little bit of time with the cane in the ground in front of you, maybe 6 to 8 paces like we got here, and hit some pulls left of the cane just to get that feeling of the sweet spot, being less behind the hands when it comes into delivery. I look forward to watching this one progress. I look forward to watching you learn more about your golf swing and get more into the system and how it applies to you. It's not about learning the whole thing, it's more just interested in what applies to John, and that's really what it's all about. So good luck with it. If you've got any questions, feel free to contact me via Facebook, Twitter, or email. I'll send you some images across along with a link for this video very shortly, and a date for about 4 weeks time. Good luck with it. If you've got any questions, feel free.